But here is what I want to tell you about what I have learned and where I have learned it from. Okay? Because how I found out, how I even heard about this podcast, the American Psyop series featuring Wes Clark and Desiree Kane and Jim Stewartson and David Troy, is that I was tagged in a thread on Twitter.
Okay.
And it was by someone I did not know, had never met or spoken to, that apparently had knowledge of my shows, of my past shows, about Standing Rock and about the people that were there. They were the only person that tagged me in any threads about this American Psyop podcast on Twitter, or who defended my broadcasts about people that are, I guess, involved in this American Psyop podcast. So I wanted to share where that thread took me and how I first learned about this American Psyop. First of all, Dave Troy tweeted in response to American Psyop asking him if he was ready for his cameo on the podcast. He said in response, "I am indeed. I haven't heard it yet. I don't know it was included in the early cuts I heard back in 2021, but it's true. I played a part in helping to connect some of the dots in Wes's story back in 2020. Everyone, check it out." And I want to reiterate that I reached out to Dave Troy, and that Dave Troy was shared with the paper that Guadalupe Correa Cabrera and I published in scientific journals about the mercenaries at Standing Rock and the damage that they were doing. Yeah, he was. Guadalupe shared our paper with him a long time ago. Yeah. And also encouraged him to reach out to me, as well as I messaged this man and never heard back from him. Wow. Telling him about Wesley Clark's connections to Nora Maccabee and to a whole bunch of other people that were red flags, okay? That should have been red flags for David Troy and Desiree Kane and all of the people that were supposedly part of this cult and victims of the PsyOp themselves. It makes it very, very hard for me to believe that Dave Troy wasn't in some way aware that they are lying.
Yep, didn't want to follow up with that, I guess.
No. So anyway, continuing on this thread, American Psyop then responds in the thread and says, if you'll scroll up, "Yeah, couldn't have gotten here without Dave." So they thank Dave. And then we've read the something. I don't know what their Twitter handle is exactly, but it's they tag Arturo Tafoya, which goes by the handle Tafoyovsky.
Okay.
And then the next tweet is by Arturo Tafoya saying, "Lol, I know." American Psyop then responds, "We absolutely. I first met Dave in like 2018, but only reconnected with him after we both reached out to Arturo Tafoya while looking into the origins of QAnon in the summer of 2020. This, I'm assuming, is Jack Bryan or whoever, maybe it's Emily Bix, his girlfriend, but one of those people that runs the American Psyop Twitter page. And then they tweet again saying, "And we reached out to Arturo Tafoya because we believed, let's go to the next part of this, because we believed that we had found a network connected to QAnon, and we're looking for someone who knew those guys and could confirm it. And boom, we found Arturo Tafoya, who certainly helped add to our understanding. I wonder why they cut him out of the entire podcast.
Yeah, no kidding.
It seems to me, the more I look into this, that nobody in the American Psyop series or in any of the groups that have used his information, including different books and documentaries, nobody wants to admit that a Mexican was doing a lot of the heavy lifting in exposing the people involved in QAnon. And also, I don't think that they want to give credit.
Oh, definitely.
To the people that, to Arturo, to the people that actually know and have exposed what and who these people are and what they're about.
Exactly, and that's what they're doing to you, too, is like they took audio from one of your shows and sliced it up, and there was many shows with Wes Clark Jr., and if that guy was trying to help him figure out his story, there was so much material you produced, plus you had to have a bunch more. Could have just picked up the phone, called us, could have called that number, 701-566-0917, left a message. You guys could have had a conversation. You could have sorted out that story real fast.
Yeah, and on the show that he stole copyright material from, had our emails too. He could have emailed you at Duke at kpppfm.com or me, Cindy, at kpppfm.com. I didn't get an email, did you?
Nope, never got one.
Nobody contacted us. So, in this thread, you will see that Arturo, he responds and he says, I remember, plus screenshots of me wanting to quit and someone promising that the most important thing was to get my story out. So, I kept helping. Notice that.
Yeah.
They kept promising him.
Stringing him along.
Stringing him along. It's the most important thing is get your story out and tell your story. So keep helping us. Keep giving us information. And then he says, of course, that did not happen. They never told his story. They never shared his side of things. And then he says, you guys know that I am the target of the same cult. The same methods were used against the same methods used against Wes were used on me.
Wow.
And you know what? If there was a victim of this cult, of this psyop, it certainly was not Wes Clark Jr. or Desiree Kane.
Yeah.
It was not Wes Clark Jr., one of the perpetrators of the psyop. It was not Desiree Kane, one of the people working with the PR team connected to Trevor Fitzgibbons. It was not them, okay? It probably was Arturo Tafoya, but these people like to usurp, like to wear the identities of the people that are the real victims, like they did at Standing Rock, and claim victimhood, as Desiree Kane did. Who cares about the Lakota women that they falsely accused of crimes, left in jail, and one to die in a hospital and another one to rot in jail? Desiree Kane is the victim Indian here.
Yeah.
Wes Clark Jr. is the victim here, right? Because even though he's nobody special, he's the son of the general who almost became president. So,
That's right.
of course, all of these governments from around the world want a piece of him. Continuing on this thread, American Psyop is a little butthurt by Arturo's putting out the dirty laundry that they strung him along, telling him to share his story because it was important that his story get out there, but then it didn't, and that they were telling him that they were there to try to protect the victims, but then they never did. And their response to that is, I wish we had used that interview. Not my call.
Oh, yeah, not my fault.
Sorry, washing my hands of this, not my problem. Mm-hmm. He says that he goes on to say, I'm assuming this is Jack Bryan, they didn't use it in part because even though we thought we would have to do a bunch of Zoom interviews, we didn't. It looked noticeably different. Still, I understand you're feeling burned by us not using that. And I'm sorry that happened. So essentially, Duke, what they're saying is, you know, the quality would have been different if we had done a whole bunch of Zoom interviews and included those in the podcast when that wasn't the look we were going for. I mean, they didn't want to degrade the quality. Can you speak a little bit to the quality of this show, this poo-cast American Psyop?
Well, there is no quality. I mean, it's audio interviews that ramble on for 9-10 hours. And there's different layers of audio. They already have the interviewer inserting commentary when you know that Wes is just rambling on, because many of the calls with Cindy are just rambling calls. Cindy's documented many hours with Wes Clark Jr. from a period of, I think she started in January of 2016 till summertime, I think towards the fall of that year of 2017, and had all sorts of conversations. And the reason we contacted him is we were working on the Kathleen Bennett case, the Lakota elder who was kidnapped by Mulaney Stoneman and Bill Running Fisher, and the veterans stand for Standing Rock, mercenaries that were paid. And Wes Clark had things to do with that, and we thought he had some influence and could move the story up because we needed help. We needed to put a spotlight on this. And he basically just was worming around and trying to prevent us. Wanted that woman to go to jail. Wanted to be responsible for all that.
He did what he did for the veterans at Standing Rock. Nothing. He left them in a lurch.
Yep.
And by the way, this excuse that they didn't want to change the look of their podcast by putting in a bunch of Zoom interviews that they would have had to do with Arturo didn't stop him from adding a bonus episode at the end, which is essentially Emily Bix doing a Zoom interview with Wes Clark Jr. And Dr. Hassan.
Exactly.
So I don't get it.
Yep.
I don't buy it. Mm-hmm. I don't get it. I think you're full of crap.
Yep.
Like your poo-casts.
Exactly.
Here is the next
This is a response to what he said,
After, sorry that happened. Mm-hmm. Arturo responds, I really don't care if I appear in the documentary. If a year-old debunked operation run by DeFango is released. And dude, why go after Cindy at media? You have to scroll down there. At media_PPP. She's the only one who, as far as I know, called out hashtag Trevor Fitzgibbons and hashtag Nora Maccabee. And the context changes a lot if you listen to the full call.
Exactly.
Because, of course, he's talking about the audio that was taken out of context and stolen, the copyrighted material that was stolen from our program and used in their poo-cast. And he's saying, why are you attacking the only person that I know of that brought up the connections to the PR machine of Trevor Fitzgibbons and Nora Maccabee and the connections to Wes Clark Jr.? Why are you trashing and slandering these people in your program and taking their material out of context?
Exactly.
When, if you listen to the full call, which Arturo Tafoya actually took the full program and loaded it up on his Conspiracy Distillery website.
Yep.
So that people could hear the full context and they could see what it was like what was being discussed in that conversation.
Exactly.
And he responds in his next post underneath that, saying what he thought of when he listened to the full call. How was she supposed to react? He asks. Here's the full video with the full phone call. So he posted it there in that same thread. This was how I first learned about American Psyop and their podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I thought, who is this person? Why does he have this link here? Why are they talking about me? So of course, I had to go and click on American Psyop and find out where they had the podcast so I could listen to them. Then I also clicked on the link he had there, which took me to his Conspiracy Distillery YouTube channel, which was hosting one of my shows, the one in question that they stole the copyrighted material from. And in that video, which he loaded complete, full, you could listen to the context of the whole thing. But let me share with you how I then went to explore this Arturo Tafoya's Twitter page, because it is a repository of information, as is the Conspiracy Distillery website. I encourage people watching my show that are following along to go and find more information there, because this gentleman has been doing the work. Apparently, it takes a Mexican to do the job. In this case, we got two Mexicans doing the job.
Exactly.
Oh, by the way, can you go back to that last post?
I thought that was
there was
important.
something else there I wanted to share with you. In this last post, he said that you can listen to the full call. He says, how was she supposed to react? Here's the full video and the phone call. And he says, after he posts his website, and she's the only other Mexican I've seen fighting this bull caca. And I experienced the same thing. Arturo was the only Mexican, but out of all of these gringos pendejos involved in the I Am cult and the QAnon movement, de todos no sale uno. You could take 100 of them and you don't get one Arturo out of that.
Yeah.
Or one Cindy Gomez-Schempp out of that. So I think that's probably one of the things that is the most embarrassing to them, that it's got to be a Mexican that is doing their work for them.
Exactly.
That is explaining things for them. And they don't want to acknowledge that that is who solved this, that, cracked the case wide open. But here, all the way back in January of 2021, Arturo was talking about the connections between Deepak Chopra and Barbara Marx Hubbard and quantum healing, QAnon, David Wilcock, Thrive, the quantum revolution, the Great Awakening worldwide, Russia, psychological operations, Gaia, Sean Stone, and Lisa Clapier, the head of this Follow Snow White, the I Am cult.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Q cult. And he posts about a video in which Richard Dawkins kind of smashes Deepak Chopra's quantum healing BS in this interview. And I wanted to share...
Who's
this is
Cindy?
the only time that Mr. Brian, the person that produced the show, even mentions my name in a tweet, or yours, or anybody's related to the content that they stole. That's the only time. Notice how they make sure to keep the name of our show, the name of our station out. So if you're listening to this program on our radio station, You're listening to 88.1 FM,
That's right.
KPPP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. And you are listening to your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
And we are now going to cover that radicalized podcast of Heidi Kuda's. Heidi Kuda has a series of podcasts you can find on YouTube. And that's how I found all of these podcasts. And they have a number of people they do the podcast with. This first one shows the podcast which features Wes Clark that Heidi Kuda was referring to in that tweet. You can see it was episode 56, and that has Jim Stewartson and Hi-Fi, the other person that does the show with them. And then in this next post, in this next image, we have the radicalized podcast featuring another person that has been promoting the American Psyop show.
Oh, that guy.
And that has been tweeting about cults and has done shows with Desiree Kane and Wes Clark and David Troy, Dr. Stephen Hassan, the so-called cult expert. And here you can see it was episode 33,
That's right.
Cult of Trump, Cult of Flynn, Cult of Dugan. And if you scroll, I think the next one shows David Troy, because they also did a podcast with him. David Troy was also on the show. On episode 1, Mind War, Crypto with Dave Troy and Finding Shared Truth. But they also did some shows with Jack Bryan. Jack Bryan was also on the show on their Radicalized pod. There's Jack Bryan in a recent podcast that they did. But they did a podcast even before this one, going back to more like the more beginning days. This one here is one that they did over almost a year ago, in which you can see that they are talking about their Active Measures documentary, and that he was the writer and co-producer of QAnon, The Search for Q. You see that?
Yep.
And he talks about that he is the CEO of the Bunker Crew Media. So these are all of the people that these folks have been collaborating with for a while. Let me share with you a video clip from this particular podcast in which they're talking about the responsibility that people have in the media when they're talking about folks like, you know, these sketchy people involved in these sketchy things. Check out what they're listening to, what they said.
I think that, you know, I spend a lot of time looking at operations and looking at intelligence things. And I think that one of the issues in communicating those is that most people don't exist in the language of intelligence. Yeah. So when they hear ops, when they hear things like that, they think James Bond, and it feels very foreign. And the way that I tend to address it, and frankly, a lot of the way I think about it, is that anytime you have an industry that's devoted to investigation, whether it's the FBI or whether you're journalism, you're going to have a problem with your contacts. So in the FBI, it's called the dirty asset problem. If you have somebody that's giving you information about a criminal organization, you have to allow them to operate within that criminal organization in order to keep giving you information. So sometimes it's called the Whitey Bulger problem, because Whitey Bulger is sort of the most famous example of this. In journalism, you have a problem of access journalism. So during the Trump years, Maggie Haberman was sort of like the key example of that you knew that Trump was her main source, and it allowed her to become the preeminent journalist for the New York Times on Trump stuff. And so, yeah, she got to put out stuff that was seemingly bad about Trump, but it was usually couched in the context of framing it from a perspective that was more palatable. And so a lot of that also happens in the world of QAnon and things like that, but they don't have the infrastructure that something like the New York Times has, or something that the FBI has, to say, hey, you know what, you might not want to have that murderer as part of our program. Or, hey, you might not want to have that spy as part of one of your sources. And the problem with dirty assets or access journalism is it's a perpetual process that gets worse as it goes. With any source, your best information is going to be the first step that they give you, because that's what they've been collecting. It's like a band. Their first album is usually going to be the best one they come out with, because they've been spending years and years developing it. And as time goes on, you rely on them more and more, and they are using you more and more.
Yeah.
And so that is the case with, again, the FBI, is the case with journalists, that you have to be really careful about being used. And I think that in the world of alt media, in the world of the internet, that those structures that are frequently don't work very well, but are there in place to keep that in check, just don't exist at all. And the only factor is how many hits you get.
Right.
And so if somebody can then create technologies that can amplify Twitter accounts, that can amplify YouTube hits, that is a huge tool that they can use, not just to give access, but to give, a venue. And so these things happen, and I think that even the perpetrators of them don't see them in the way of the context of operations. I think they see it in the context of access journalism sometimes, or I think that they see it in the context of, well, I'm just doing what I have to do. But when you see people reporting on like QAnon for years and reporting on things adjacent to all the people involved, but not the people involved, I think one should be suspicious of that at least as much as they're suspicious of why Maggie Haberman's New York Times articles always seem to make Trump seem like the innocent or the aggrieved party.
Wow.
Or Jack, it also seems that some of the people reporting on QAnon don't come from a journalism background or an English background or a reporting background. And so there is, there is that dearth, there's that gap between what you get when you go through, an apprenticeship or an education process. They're coming from different sectors, and all of a sudden they, fancy themselves. Maybe they get an article or two, but they've sort of lost the distinction that you're making precisely, and knowing how to deal with the source or what even is a source. And so you saw a lot of reporting that was, frankly, just becoming a mouthpiece for other people's agendas in that process.
Yeah, I mean the thing about
becoming a mouthpiece for other people's agenda in the process. Access journalists.
Imagine that.
Dirty assets being used as a source and ending up being used by that source. You know what the funny thing is to me?
What's that?
Arturo Tafoya was one of the people that they interviewed for these different shows and books and movies. They used his content. They produced their videos on YouTube. They produced their documentaries, their shows with his help.
Yeah.
With his assistance.
And expertise.
With his expertise.
His research.
And in fact, they even gave him credit in some of their shows. However, they cut his interviews from their American Psyop series. They barely flash his name on the documentaries, in the comments, in the description of their YouTube channels, and they completely cut him from the discussions, from the groups, and they've tried to discredit him thoroughly, while at the same time they want to villainize certain people, while at the same time taking the Nora Maccabees and turning them, and the Wes Clarks and the Desiree Canes, and turning them into victims. I mean, what he just said, what Jack Bryan just said, is advice I think that Jack Bryan needs to hear.
Exactly.
I think that old Jack Bryan needs to talk to new Jack Bryan. If he could travel back in time and talk to the old Jack Bryan, he needs to hear from that guy and take that guy's advice. This is like the pot calling the kettle black.
Yep.
To the worst degree.